Welcome back to our fourth presentation on court documents. So I've taken us back to the local rules for Collin County. We've already looked at this page, but I'd like to draw your attention to letter E. All documents must contain the filer's complete contact information in the signature block. And that information needs to be the filer's name, address, phone number, and email address. It's also common or considered pretty standard to include the state bar number as well as the law firm name and the designation of who the particular law attorney represents. Let me show you an example of a pretty common looking signature block. We have it here. So we can see that we have respectfully submitted. Get rid of that extra space there. We're going to have a line for the signature. We're going to have the signer's name and bar number, the name of the law firm, the street address, the physical address, and the email address, the telephone number, and the facsimile. So we'll go through the formatting for those, but those are kind of the ingredients. Oh, also, we're going to have attorneys for whomever, and it's pretty common, actually. I'm not going to make that bold because I would either have to stack this onto two lines or move it over farther. You can see this is pretty close to the center. So you maybe in a perfect world would want to have it a little bit farther over, but this is okay where we have it. Let's just see what happens when we move it over just a scooch. Going to need a single space this obviously. I can make it bold. Okay, so you can see that having that long of a tab what we could do here is we could just not tab it over. So it all fits on one line. So let's go through the procedures for how we're going to go ahead and create this. Okay, so again, just a little reminder, lots of different states have different signature blocks. They look differently. And again, perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable when you practice in that state, like Florida, you're going to make your signature block look like a Floridian one. Texas one would be out of place there. When you're in Texas, use this type of signature block. Now, technically, the Floridian block, which I'm not going to show you because I don't want to confuse you, you could make that comply with the local rule that we saw. It would just look really strange to legal professionals here. And again, your goal is to make your document blend in, at least in terms of format. We talked in a previous lecture about the importance of not beginning a page with a signature format, not beginning a page with the signature block. So that's why on this example, I have on the top of the page at least 2 lines from the previous page. So that's a way to do that. You may have to actually force a page break so that you can have a few lines on the signature block page. You want to keep your signature block on one page. Now, sometimes that's not going to be possible. Sometimes you have too long of a signature block. Now, obviously, this one isn't especially long, but it is definitely possible to have a signature block that extends more than one page. We'll see some examples in a few minutes. So if it naturally extends to more than one page, you want to have the break be logical, and I'll show you some examples of that in a few minutes. But it's not the end of the world by any means. But if it would nicely fit on a page, then go ahead and, if it would fit on a page, but you end up having it. Let me just scroll this down so you can see an example of what I mean. Let's say that it was like this, that your page ended, or your text ended here. Actually, we need to go a little farther. So here we have, you can see we have attorneys for plaintiff Sally Smith. Now there's some ways of fixing this. For example, we could make it not bold, and We could maybe not make them all caps. Oops, here we go. Sorry about that. Cancel. And so there can be ways of doing that. You could also, as I moved it over, but you could move it a little bit to the left. This is a pretty ideal spot, kind of beginning just beyond the halfway point. But if it were one over, that would be fine if it lets you keep it on one page. But let's say there's a couple of other returns. Well, in this point, there's just no way to keep it on one page. So what you're going to do is do another page break here. So I'm hitting Control Enter so you can start a new page. Okay, you're going to want to switch your spacing to 1.15, and obviously you're going to keep your other settings the same. So going back to our document, let's say we had formatted this document. So we're going to keep our our double spacing setting, but we want to have this be 1.15, and we're going to want it to be add. You're going to want this formatting for the rest of the document as well. So really the whole document is going to be 1.15 except for the section that involves double spacing. So that's going to be the one exception. Now whether you have this section being double space or 1.15, that's kind of an aesthetic judgment for you to make. I'd kind of look at it and see what kind of eyeballs looks best. I wouldn't stress too much over it. Let's go back to our rules here, and let's go up here to our document. So now we're ready to begin our, so we're going to start it, I'm going to change this, we'll say 55 to 65. That's where you should begin. Now you can tell this is significantly farther over than our signature block in a letter. Our signature block in a letter is going to start, let me turn on. It's going to actually, let me just start this. Here we go. Let's do tabs. So here we go. It's not going to show us the tabs, so we can count the tabs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're at least one tab over, and really I think this would ideally be your spot. Here we could put this on its own line. Looks like it's too much, but anyway, so it will be probably at least one tab farther over. You're not really shooting for a centered look, you're shooting for an off-right look. Okay, then you're going to not use very truly yours or sincerely as for your signature block. You're going to use respectfully submitted. There's just one choice in this situation. You are submitting this document for the court's review. So, but you're going to follow the same rules we use with very truly yours and sincerely. You're going to capitalize just the first letter of the first word. So we're not going to capitalize submitted, and we're going to close with a comma here. Then you are going to leave 2 blank spaces. Then you're going to return and draw an underline here. So you end up having actually 3 spaces. Now you can have a 4th, or even sometimes a 5th if you've got somebody who signs with kind of big dramatic letters. But you only need 3. So this is the same number that you need when you're doing a letter. So the pattern to remember is you need to provide at least 3 lines for signatures. Now again, if you're struggling to keep it on a page, and it's not for this class, but in your real life, is it terrible if you just have 2? No, that would work. For this class though, go ahead and make 3. Including the line that you have the underline. And you want to have the underline to extend at least to the end of your characters. So here our Y is our, well actually, let me go back here. Oops. So you're going to want your line to extend at least as far as here. Well, I mean, I don't think you'd have to, but you definitely want to give enough space for Roberta Rodriguez. And of course, um, a signature is going to be significantly longer than this. Now, if you're filing electronically, eventually you're going to do this. Be nice if I could spell, wouldn't it? Okay. Oops, sorry, Rodriguez. So you're going to get rid of these extra letters and you're going to underscore. But we don't add this until after the person has signed. So you don't want to add this until Roberta Rodriguez has blessed your form. So for our class, you won't ever sign anything, either with a wet signature or with an electronic signature, because you're submitting it to the attorney, but the attorney hasn't approved it yet. So you wouldn't put this. It would be like almost like forging a signature in a way, because you're saying, oh, this person has approved it, when in fact they haven't approved it. So underneath, I'm sorry, let's go back here. So we're going to start with respectfully submitted. We're going to make sure there's at least 3 spaces here, 1, 2, and then the line for signing. And again, depending upon your signer, you may need more space. And then you're going to start that line directly under the R and respectfully submitted. You can see that lines up. We're right here at 3.5 inches. So all of that lines up. In fact, everything down the line lines up there. Then the next line, you're going to put the person's name who's signing it. The first name is going to be the lead attorney. He or she does not have to be the person signing it, but this is the most senior person on the case. Then below his or her name, you're going to put the bar number. There's lots of different ways of doing this. Sometimes people put Texas bar number, some people put state bar number, some people abbreviate it to TBN. Then you're going to include the number. If you had another person signing it, Rachel Smith, then you would put her bar number. If someone doesn't have a bar number, they can't sign. So a paralegal would never be on this list. You would never have the name on here. Either Rachel or Roberta could sign this, and you won't be able to tell until the signature is entered which one does. Again, this list can go on for quite a while. You could have 3 or I've seen 5 even attorneys' names. You may wonder, well, why would you have more than one? Again, you only need one. It's a satisfying thing for an attorney who's worked on a document. It's a little bit, in a weird way, kind of like being published, that your name is on the document. It's a nice thing for the more senior attorney to allow the more junior folks to be on the documents. And it's not unusual for the more junior attorney to actually sign the document, because senior attorney may not be there. It may not be, if it's an important document, may not be following the ins and outs quite as much. So after you have all the names for the attorneys within that law firm, you're going to give the name of the law firm. Sometimes people dress this up and might put it, with small caps. Here we go. We'll go with small caps. It may be in bold or italics or something. That's fine if you want to dress it up. Then you're going to have the physical street address if somebody wants to mail something to the law firm. And then you're going to have the email address, and this will be of the first attorney, the attorney of record. Then the telephone number. This can be to the switchboard, or it can be the direct line of Roberta. and also a facsimile number. And again, this is likely to be of a central location within the law firm. You need to have all these elements because if we go back and look at the rules, we need the filer's name. That's Roberta Rodriguez. We need the address. We have that. We have the telephone number and the email address. You don't technically need the fax number. So now, and then the last thing isn't technically required, but it's very common. Keep in mind that there may be more than one plaintiff in a particular case, and they may have different attorneys. And so you want to make it clear whose side you're on, who you're representing. And so this is a very good practice. So do it so you don't lose a point. Now, one thing you will sometimes see is you will see that instead of the name of the law firm going in this place, sometimes people will put it right here. That is very common and completely acceptable. But for this class, we're just not going to do that. So nothing wrong with it. It's just not going to be our practice. I'm going to go ahead and put it back here. Okay, so I think we've gone through all of the things. Let's see. Add an electronic signature until the attorney has approved the document. Okay, so now we're ready for the certificate of service. So the certificate of service is going to be attached to all the documents other than the petition. So you're going to have this in virtually everything. The certificate of service should be on the same page as the signature block if it will fit. So we're going to try to make that fit. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to center it. And we're going to type, I'm going to make a bold, certificate of service. Oops, we're going to capitalize the major word just like we would with any title. Certificate of service. You know, in a perfect world, I would like for there to be one more space here. So there we have a nice beginning point. The only thing we're going to center is going to be the certificate of service. So let's go back to our instructions. Again, if you're using a model from another state, the way that they format a certificate of service might be very different. So use the certificate of service format that I talk about. If you can't get the certificate of service all on one page, but it will theoretically fit on one page, then go ahead and start a new page with it. But be sure you're starting at the top of the page. And that's again one reason why you might want to do a page break. So you're going to want to have the language indicating, you know, that this is in fact a certificate. So I'm just going to look at the language. Okay, let's see if we can get some other language. Again, this is one of these things that you're going to have a form, so you're not going to reinvent the wheel. Here we go. Ah, this is a nice one. So I'm just going to take this. I'm going to say this certificate is to certify. This certificate is to certify that a true and correct copy, a true and correct copy of this, I'm going to say answer. And we don't need this to be in bold, so I'm going to get rid of that. Has been forwarded by certified mail, return receipt requested. Has been forwarded by certified mail, return receipt requested. Before electronic filing, this was the way to file, or the way to send stuff. It's not the only permitted way, but it was the most common way. To the following counsel of record. To the following counsel of record. on this blank day of blank, and then the year. On this blank, and we'll go with October, 2002. We're going to do another line. And now we have a space to list all of the council of record. We leave this blank here because, again, in the days when you actually would mail this or to the parties, and actually have someone physically carry it down to the courthouse or mail it to the courthouse, that there would be a wet number here. So a person would actually write, let's say it's October 21st, so someone would literally write 2, 1, and then ST here. Of course, nowadays with electronic serving, then it probably would be, 21st day. You're going to only add that, though, once you know what's going to happen. So this should be blank for now because you don't know exactly when this is going to be filed. Maybe Roberta's super busy today and she's not going to have time to finalize it. It's not technically due for a few days, so you're not entirely sure exactly when it will be ready to go out. So we happen to know that the opposing counsel is Jorge Martinez, and he is with the law firm of Smith and Gerber, PLC. His office is in Dallas, so we'll make it 1234 Ackerd, I don't know, Ackerd Street, Ackerd Avenue, I'm not sure. And that's in Dallas, Texas, 75777. I don't know what the zip code's there. I'm going to make something up here. And we are good to go. I'm going to add an extra space here. Now, if let's say there's another attorney of record, then I might add Samantha Talbot, and she is with Alexander Ross, PC, and their offices are next door to Smith and Gerber. Let's add a suite to this. Suite 1000, and they are on Suite 1200, and it's in Dallas, Texas, 7705. So you can see in a really big case, you might legitimately go to another page. So, which I just did. So I'm going to move this to its own page. Since you can see, I'm not going to have enough room. And now I'm ready for the closing step. Oops, sorry. I don't need to do that. So here I'm going to tab over and do an underlining. And this line should match up with this. And so you can see I have this at 3.5, so I'm going to want this also at 3.5. So here we are. I can see this is 3.5, so I'm going to do a line. And it's going to be Roberta Rodriguez. We do not need any additional information for signature block because this is all one document. It's all filed together. Certificate of service is not separate from this answer. So there's no need, and in fact, it's not a good idea to repeat all this information. We don't need respectfully submitted. We don't need, we only need the person signing it, which might be Rachel. It's fine if it's a different person who's actually signing it. We don't need any of this information. It's fine to include who Jorge and Samantha represent. You could say, attorney for plaintiff, Bob Gray, and this could be attorney for defendant, Fred Wilson. You can see there's plenty of room here for Roberta's signature, whether it's a wet signature or we do that type of signature. So we don't need to have it farther down. I mean, it's fine if you want to have it farther down. One thing you'll see in some of these examples is sometimes the signature is put above um, the names of the people that's being sent to. That's not a best practice because um, you want to show that the list of names are over at this point. If you put the signature spot up here, then no one can tell exactly how many names went on. So if somebody tries to falsify a document, it can create some evidentiary issues. So you want to have the signature block at the lowest point. You don't need to date this signature. This is going to be your date. Now, obviously, if you're right at the end of the month and you're not sure whether it's going to be filed on October 31st of October or November 1st, you can leave this blank as well. That's perfectly valid. I guess if you're straddling the line between 2020 and 2021, you could even leave that blank. But it's not a best practice to just kind of leave a hugely long blank. You're going to try to write this out as much as possible. Sometimes I'll show you some examples. Let's see if there's anything else I need to talk about here. Of course, nowadays the service will usually be electronic, but you still need a certificate of service in that case. Let's see if there's anything else. The letterhead obviously shouldn't be, the certificate of service shouldn't be in letterhead. So this looks good. I think we've done a fine certificate of service. So now, of course, if we were doing a certificate of conference, we could add that. I think most of the time people put certificates of conference above certificate of service. But we're not doing that in this course. But if we were, we could easily add a certificate of conference here. Let's look at some, actually before we do that, then you would add that in this location. See if there's any other things I want to cover. So again, a certificate of conference is very common. They're going to be used when there is something about the motion that is likely to be or possibly going to be opposed by the other side. For example, let's say that I want to reopen discovery. Well, the court is going to be very interested in hearing what the other side thinks about it. Now, if I want to extend discovery and the other side wants to extend discovery, what we would likely do is include in a certificate of conference that we both agree, and that we would entitle our motion agreed motion, meaning both sides agree. Well, you can imagine the likelihood of getting it granted is significantly higher if both sides agree than if one side supports it and some side opposes it. It doesn't necessarily mean for sure that the court's going to grant it, but it significantly increases the chances. So that's a good mode. But even if there is disagreement, and even if you know for sure there's going to be disagreement, usually motions do, unless they're a dispositive motion, meaning it's just a motion that will dispose of the case, then you do need to contact the other side. And it can be a pretty pro forma thing. Hey, I need to do a certificate of conference on this. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? And it kind of goes like this. This is what I'm proposing. What is your position? And you'll hear the other side go, we oppose it. Okay, thanks, appreciate it. You'll be getting it in a day or two. It's not a hostile thing. You don't have to duke it out for an extended period of time, but you need to at least see if there's an agreement. And sometimes there is agreement, and sometimes there's some negotiation or horse trading. If I really want an extension, for example, I'd really like it to be agreed because that's much more likely to be granted. So I might say something to the other side. Well, I'm willing to give a little bit in this area if you can grant me this. So horse trading is certainly can happen in those circumstances. So let's look at some documents here. Already got to look at the rules. So here's an example of a signature block. You can see it's pretty far over. And you can see here they put the name of the law firm right here, which is fine. It happens pretty regularly. We have a signature line. You can see they didn't provide much space for a signature. I think it's because they were about to run out of space. They have the name of the law firm, so that's nice. I mean, sorry, the name of the person, we want that. The state bar number here, we have the address, telephone number, and telecopier is an old-fashioned term for fax. A lot of law firms use the term telecopier. You notice that the email is not here, but before e-filing, emails were not commonly put on these. And you can see they're defining who they represent. So this is pretty similar to the format that we're going to use. Let's look at a federal court one. This one looks different, but it's not as different as maybe you think. One thing I notice here is that it does go to, it's divided on pages. We want to have our certificate of service all on one page if it'll all fit. So again, if I were doing this one, I would move the certificate of service down to this next line. Again, typing in the date like this is probably not a best practice. And you can see that they have the attorney actually signing. In fact, this is really bad, where you have the signature line on one page and the actual name of the person who's signing on another page. So you definitely want to keep these two together. And again, they've put the signature block above the name of the attorney who's going to be served with it. So this part should have definitely been down here. Instead of actually saying how it's going to be served, they have a place where I can check a box. This box right here would be the certified mail return receipt requested. But you can see there's other choices. This is fine, but it's not a best practice. The best practice is to have it actually written up here, because this is possible you forget to check it. You do want to put it here. And again, before the days of the e-filing, this was how most people handled it. Again, sometimes overnight delivery, overnight courier sometimes happened. This is another example. We have certified mail. This is to certify. I think I actually use this language. And you can see they actually include here the tracking numbers for the certified mail, which is a nice touch. And then there is a place for the signature. So this is very much kind of what you would want to expect. If you're sending a certified mail to one person, you'd want to do the same type of service to another, unless maybe one were international or one wasn't local and you were hand delivering the local one. So I think those are the examples I wanted to share. At this point, I think we're done with court documents. The one thing I would emphasize is that at the end, you are going to want to proof. Go over it, turn on your Pilcrow so you can see all the formatting and remove anything, whether you added it or whether it was in the original model. The proofing process is something that probably is going to take 20 or 25% of your time. It's something that you shouldn't rush, and it's best to kind of step away from the document. If you can, do it one day and then come back to it the next day after you've slept. When you're can be a little bit distant from the document, and it'll be a lot easier to see the typos under those circumstances. I hope that this has been helpful, and I thank you for your attention. Have a wonderful day.